We're going to go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to today's cybersecurity training. Thank you for taking the time to join us. This webinar is a listen and learn presentation. However, if you have any questions along the way, please enter them in the Q&A section of the platform and we'll monitor them and answer them as we can, if not at the end. You'll also have access to move and drag the video box around if you haven't realized that already, so you can put it into the best position for your viewing preference. This training is also being recorded, so you'll have access to it on our website to share it as a training tool with your colleagues or staff, or you can rewatch it as you need to. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to our host, Kenny Round, CEO of Braver Technology.
Great. Thank you very much, Jen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Those of you who are been to this webinar in the past, we're going to cover some new topics and some existing topics. The goal of these webinars, obviously, we have them once a quarter for a couple reasons. One, first and foremost, it's muscle memory. We cover some of the same topics because it's just like going to the gym. Basically, if you go to the gym once, it's really only going to help you a tiny bit. But if you keep going over and over again, it's going to really start to sink in and really start to show results. So that's why we do these once a quarter. We also record them, as Jen mentioned, because what we want you to do, we want you to share them with new staff when they come on board, along with existing staff, but also new staff. This watching the training should be part of your onboarding process for your new staff to say, this is our cybersecurity policy. This is what we want you to look for, and this is what we want you to do. As Jen mentioned, if you have questions during the presentation, please pop them right in there. I'll try and do my best to keep an eye on them. I'll also try and talk as slow as possible, but I do have a lot of stuff that I want to go over. So with that, let's get going. So real quick about Braver Technology. So we are a managed service provider serving the Northeast, Massachusetts and Rhode Island area. We've been around for 30 years. We've been doing IT support for that entire time. So we've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. You can see that's my handsome, devilish face right there. And it seems like a lot less gray hairs in that picture than there are in real life right now. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the new challenges and security problems and solutions. So we're going to talk about what's happened in our industry and what attacks there are and how people are trying to get into you that they weren't trying to get before. As you know, this is a constantly evolving technology that they're going on, and I call it a technology. Basically, the hackers are technicians, they're engineers. Securing your network now. We're going to talk about the basic blocking and tackling that you should have in place in your network. And then what's next? How to protect your office next, what you should do. And then we're going to talk a little bit about hybrid work office and working from home. Okay, so with that, let's get into this. Why quarterly? I talked about that basically we really want to keep reinforcing this. We want you to reinforce it with your staff. This is really important subject. This is probably the most important subject that a lot of your companies have in place. Okay, so let's talk about the current landscape environment. So those of you who have been to our to this webinar before, you know this slide's been up since the beginning. But something interesting, this is the first time that we've actually had the President of the United States talk about this particular issue that we have. What is this issue? This issue is that there are third world countries that are literally paying people to be professional hackers. They're literally putting in help wanted ads. They're literally funding this this thing. I was so happy when finally the president started talking about these things, because this is really going to help us a lot, I hope, in moving forward and kind of enforcing these security policies. But the reality is, this is a problem. This is a huge problem. It's a global problem. We have enemies. These are the ways that our enemies are attacking us. They're not necessarily attacking us only by warfare anymore. They're attacking us financially and through our companies. Biggest case that came out, obviously, is the oil attack that happened. So the Colonial pipeline attack, basically, there's different ways that they got in. However, it came out into light. So those of you who know, basically, Colonial Penn, oil producing company, delivers a lot of oil to the whole southern part of the United States, was down. People were without oil, all because of computers. It had nothing to do with manpower, had nothing to do with functionality, had to do with computers. How did they get in? Well, come to find out that they got in through some basic blocking and tackling that wasn't done. They had an old user on the system that wasn't disabled, still had the same password from when they were enabled, and did not have two-factor authentication on their VPN. These are the basic blocking and tackling. And those of you who are our clients on the phone, on the webinar, know that this is something we talk to you about on a regular basis. We actually have a scorecard that we're going to go over in a second. That actually, this is one of the items on that scorecard that we actually alert to you, saying you really need two-factor authentication on your SSL VPN. This is why we talk about that. This is why we bring that up, because we're trying to avoid instances like this happening in the network. The other thing that happened is along the same line is they were attacking a water supply. Most people don't know this one because this one ended up being a minor one, but the bad guys, right, shortly after the oil one, they were actually going after a water supply and actually trying to shut down water supply for an entire area and trying to shut that down. So they're really trying to use the technology to go after the industry. This obviously is one that's more recent that has to do with Kaseya. So they were attacking a major platform that managed service providers use to provide their industry. Again, the good, like, there's good and bad and everything. Obviously, the bad is very obvious in this one, but the good that came out of this is that now people are talking about this. It's coming to light. It's being in the news. That can only help our industry. It can only help us promote this message. When the President of the United States talks about an attack and a cyber attack individually, finally people start to notice. Finally people start to listen, saying, wow, maybe this is more than just a small thing. Maybe this is a big thing that I have to look into. The other thing that I want you to take away from this is that basically the way that the managed service providers, so all of them across the board unilaterally shut down the server. They shut it down to, even if they weren't breached, they shut it down as a precaution. So that's the right move, obviously. It's the right move. The big thing to take away of it is that the managed service providers that ended up not being affected are the ones that had backup plans in place. And so I challenge you in your industry and your organization to look at everything you use and say, what if I don't have access to that tomorrow? How else can I manage? How else can I work? We do that on a regular basis. We're looking for those central points of failure, and we say, okay, if this shuts down, how else are we going to function? How else are we going to manage? How else are we going to do? So we were one of the ones who shut down our Kaseya server really early, and we had zero disruption in our base. You know why? Because we had a backup plan in place. We said, okay, if we ever need to shut this down for whatever reason, we're going to take care of our clients this way. And it was worked. And so we had the system, we had it already tested. We didn't just have it in the corner, we tested on a regular basis. And when the time came, we were able to answer the call. And that's what I want you to do in your organization as well. I want you to look at what you do, how you do it. If you don't have access to that, how can you get around that? How else can you work? All right. Next thing I want to talk about is that when security breaches happen, it's not only enough anymore to restore from backup. Now there's basically the next thing that we're worried about is that people taking that information and actually using it extortion, using it against you. So now it's not just about disaster recovery. It's not just about backup. It's not just about covering. It's like, okay, we now have to prevent them from getting in the house in the first place. We now have to get them. How do we prevent them from even getting that data? Because now they're finding new ways. So they're finding out that, okay, customer bases are maturing. Customer bases are able to recover. They're able to, well, they're not going to put themselves out of business. They're going to find a new way to make money. So what they're saying now is, okay, what we're going to do is before we encrypt this data, we're going to grab it, and then we're going to hold it for ransom. So what we need to do, again, is just focus on keeping people out of the network in the first place on it. All right. One of the ways to do that is by eliminating how they get paid. Are we going to get rid of Bitcoin? No, we're not. We're not like, oh, well, I wish we could tomorrow. But it doesn't look like it's going anywhere. However, this is more good news that came out. The fact that the government, the US government, is finally talking about this, it's now looking and investigating into these other countries like China, Russia, all the names you can think of, that are actually mining the Bitcoin. And so the news is coming out that China willingly shut down some Bitcoin mining facilities. That was huge news for us. If they can keep going along that lines and start regulating it, that's going to give us that much more protection in keeping it. If we can block the way these guys are getting paid, it's going to start reducing their attacks. The FBI has actually been able to recover some funds from Bitcoin, which is a huge step forward. And again, they weren't doing it when the small companies were getting hit. They didn't really care as much. But now that these big companies are getting hit, they're starting to recover that money. The rumor is that they were able to recover some of the ransom money that was paid by the Colonial oil line. That's huge. The reason that's huge is not necessarily because we care that Colonial Oil got their money back. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But what we care about is the fact that if they're able to get in there, it's one more resource that we're taking away from the bad guys. That's what we really care about, is if we can try and stop them from getting paid, we can hopefully reduce the attacks, or at least reduce the incentive for the attack. So again, this is along that same lines that the FBI is now finally putting some resources in play to actually go grab that money. If they're doing this, then what that means is that we're not paying the bad guys anymore. If you stop paying them, eventually they're going to go out of business. All right, let's talk some about your network. Let's talk about the basics of your network and what you should have in place going through. So first and foremost, what you should have is a firewall. I know it sounds really obvious. I know it sounds really basic, but you'd be surprised how many new clients we come on and we look and their firewalls are just not up to snuff and not up to par, or they're not patched, or the ports are open. This is your first line of defense into your network. You need to close down every port that shouldn't be opened. This should be updated on a regular basis. It should be patched on a regular basis. Penetration testing happening. All those things are going on. So let's talk about the next part of it, which is going to be remote users SSL. Now, I know that we brought this up so many times in the past, and users just rolled their eyes. They're like, oh, yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately, now we have Colonial Oil that we can use. That is like, listen, this is why you should do it. And the worst part is that it's either free or extremely cheap. It's extremely, extremely cheap to do this. So if you don't have it, I implore you to set it up into your network. This is remote use. So basically, people working from home, what you really want to do is have a remote acceptable use policy. If you need one, we'll send you ours. You can use it as a template, but really what you do is talk about what your users can and can't do and shouldn't do while they're working remotely. Okay. Talk about antivirus. Antivirus is a very basic blocking and tackling thing. You should have AV on all of your systems. Again, I know that all of our clients are covered, great, but I'm talking to the ones that aren't, that basically you need to have a good next-gen antivirus solution that's monitored regularly, that is centrally controlled. Don't let your users determine what the AV is and whether it's up to date or anything like that. You need a central location on that actually controls where the AV and who has access to what. Spam and virus filtering. Essentially, you need to have a good quality spam and virus. We need to stop the bad emails before they get to you as much as possible. Are they going to get through? Yes, they're going to get through. Of course they are. That's why good phishing testing comes into play as well. But still, you want to have some kind of basic blocking and tackling. For those clients that are on Office 365, this means adding advanced threat protection or Microsoft Defender to your Office 365 account. Talking $2 per user per month. It's a pretty minimal price to pay for the threat protection that it'll give you in your system. So if you don't have that in place, you really should have that in place. These are the typical stats of messages that come through, the percentage of spam versus of bad mail versus good mail. Next thing to talk about is DNS filtering. Essentially, what you want for DNS filtering is you want to have something in place that is going to prevent the clients from going to known bad websites. If there's a website that's already known to be bad, why not block a user from getting out there in the first place? They get a simple message that pops up, looks like this, and basically just keeping them from getting there in the first place. Again, this is a minimal. It's one of our. It's our part of our core solution. It should be part of your core solution as well. All right. Now, getting into wireless. Wireless should really, this is really key. Every network should have at least 2 wireless networks in it. You should have the corporate wireless and you should have the guest wireless. You don't have to have the guest wireless. You don't have to have the corporate wireless, but this is the distinction between the two. The only thing that should be on the corporate wireless is devices that are required to talk to your servers and your network to do their function. If somebody has an iPhone or an iPad or any kind of device that is not, that will work outside of your network, put it on the guest wireless. Don't even give out the corporate wireless. If somebody needs to be on the corporate wireless, you should be the only one that has that. You should be the only one that types it in. Don't give it to anybody. And if you have a solution right now where you have rogue devices on your corporate wireless, change the password and then only give it out to the devices that need it. Why would you do that? Well, as soon as you put on somebody's personal device on your network, just by saying it out loud, you can probably guess what the problem is. You're putting somebody's personal device on your network. You don't know what's on that device. You don't know what access is on it. You don't know what apps they loaded on it. You don't know what they did with it. Keep it off your network. Keep the devices on your network, the ones that need it. All right, let's talk about disaster recovery imaging. Obviously, if anything happens to your network, this is the first place you're going to go. So you should have a local backup, and that should be your primary backup. Why should the local backup be your primary backup? Because let's face it, the offsite backup is going to be in that extreme case. The onsite backup is going to be the first one we go to because it's right there. It's the fastest one we can get at. It should be segmented onto its own network, should have its own logins, have its own security, have its own everything. That's all to protect it from malicious attacks. So that device should always have a local backup. It should be a full image of your server, not individual files. You should be able to spin up that whole server off of that local backup. So basically, if you have an issue, I want to be able to bring in an entire box, plug it into that NAS device, and spin up your whole server. That's the ideal scenario we want, and it's not that expensive and not that difficult to do. It's the only way that we do backups for our clients. All right, so now that we talked about local backup, let's talk about backups for cloud data. So basically, just because your data is up on the cloud does not mean that it's foolproof. So essentially, Microsoft, Dropbox, Dropsuite, you name it, they all have their own data retention policy. It may not match the data retention policy that you want. Chances are it doesn't. It's usually about 30 days. So if you're missing a document and you don't know for 30 days, that's a problem. The other thing, what happens if all your data is encrypted and then Microsoft isn't encrypted? I want to have my data in a redundant location. In case anything happens to Microsoft and they're down, I want to have access to it. If Microsoft goes on some kind of denial of service attack and they're down for 3 days, I want to know I can get my data somewhere else, and so do you. So you want to have redundant data to a different location and a different source that is not Microsoft, but then also has a longer retention than Microsoft. All right. This is basically an article restating kind of what I said, that basically just because your data is on Teams doesn't mean it's safe. They can still attack it. Same thing with Dropbox, same thing with all the other applications that are out there. We're just as concerned about all of those. We get into offsite data. Offsite data is probably more important now than it ever has been before. If the bad guys get in, first thing they're going to do is they're going to go after your backups. They're not going to do anything else. They're going to go after your backup, your local backups first. That's the first thing they're going to try and attack. Why? Because they don't want you to be able to restore. They're going to go after your internal backups first. Then they're going to start grabbing your data as much as they can, and then they're going to encrypt it. They're going to grab it first before they encrypt it because they don't want you to know that they're grabbing it. All of those things are the main thing that you have, the main defense you have against those is your offsite backup. That's outside their reach. They can't get it. It's on a whole nother server. It's incredibly important right now. And that offsite backup should be a complete image of your server. So again, you want to be able to spin that offsite backup up. We spin up our clients' offsite backups once a quarter to test them, just to make sure they work. That's how important we think the offsite backup is. Okay, so that's your basic network. Those are your basic blocking and tackling. For our clients, what we do is we give them a regular scorecard on their network. And the reason that we want to do this is we want to keep in mind what they have. Do they have the basic blocking and tackling? Do they have the basics? And we want to reinforce that with them over and over and over again. So we want to keep going. But then also this list matures and grows as new technology comes on, as new threats come on, as we learn new things in our industry. We keep growing this and giving them to on a regular basis. You want to have some kind of regular check-in on your security. Okay. So data breaches, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but basically, you guys know, like there's so many news articles, so many hits out there in the regular industry. It's a regular problem. It happens to big companies, it happens to small companies, it happens to everybody. I don't think I need to scare you on this anymore because there's enough news out there that everybody has it. Um, so essentially what we're looking at is there are different organizations that are hit. As you can see, the ones that we're worried about are the ones that never mention anything that have information about you. So we're worried about ones that have your username, your password, and all of that in place. We're kind of worried about those because a lot of times those usernames and passwords, unfortunately, are very similar to the username and password that you use in the in your office. That's a concern for us. So basically, if you get breached on a personal level, we're still worried about it on a corporate level because chances are you're going to use your cat's name, your dog's name, your kid's birthday, your kid's name, your anniversary, something like that you're using on the personal level and you're using something similar on a professional level. That's a problem. We'll talk about that on a different topic, but basically if you've used that on the personal level, guess what? I'm going to go into your social account. I'm going to see that you work at company XYZ. I'm going to assume that at company XYZ, your login name is a first initial, last name, first name, last name, last name, first initial, whatever it is. I'm going to try all those variations, and I'm going to try variations of that same password that you use for your Facebook, your Instagram, all of those, because I know they're going to be the same and I know they're going to be similar. Once I can get in there, now I have the keys to the kingdom. So incident response template. So you should make sure you have some kind of incident response plan in place. For those of you that are our clients, we can work with you to help you get an incident response plan in place. What we want you to do is have a step-by-step process. Say, if something happens, this is who we're going to call. And it's not only going to be IT. Some of you, especially in the healthcare industry, who you're going to call is going to be your lawyers. It's going to be your PR person. It's going to be your insurance company. It's not always going to be IT. So that's why you need an incident response plan in place to say, okay, who do I call? IT is going to be the first one, but probably right up there is going to be your insurance company, your lawyers, and all those other ones that are mentioned. So you want to have that in place. Again, if you're a client of ours, happy to help you put that together as well. All right, so different types of web. So basically, on the internet, it's not just one layer. It's not just one road. It's like a multi-layer road. There's multiple layers to go on. So you have the top layer, which is just the regular browsing. That's your YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all of that stuff. So that's your basic level. Then you have what called the middle layer. And the middle layer are the secure areas, the places that you can't get into without a password and some kind of security. So those are your bank accounts, your hotel accounts, everything that you need a username and password to get into. You need some kind of function to get in there. And then you have the bad area. You have the dark web. This is where all the bad stuff happens. So basically, when your credentials get leaked or when something bad happens or just the hackers themselves, they communicate just like you communicate. Like you might be communicating with the rest of your staff via Teams. Well, guess what? These bad guys are communicating through themselves through something similar, some kind of app as well. They're doing it on this bottom layer. The bottom layer is not tracked. It's no trafficking. It's an invite only. It's a speakeasy. You name it. You can only get there if somebody invites you in there. So you can't see what's going on. That's where all the bad stuff happens. That's where the FBI is constantly trying to monitor, and the hackers are now blocking it. It used to be really easy for us to go in and see what credentials were available and what usernames, and they've now started to even block that. They're onto it. So they're getting more and more protective on their side. So you're securing your network, they're securing their network. It's a constant battle between the two. This is what a typical breach happens, what they look like, how many infected hosts and everything like that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because the next slide is the most important slide that we have, or the next section, I should say, is the most important section. So it's on user education. So basically, your first line of defense is your users and their education. They're the ones, unfortunately, that are trying to be breached. They're the ones that you need to keep up to date. So how do we do that? Let's talk about a couple things in here. So let's talk about websites. When they get to a website, they mistype a label, they mistype something that shouldn't be on, they're going to see one of these messages like this. It's really important that they know not to click on any of these, not to click on any links. You click on the red X at the top. You don't click on that button when it says download. You don't click on that OK. You don't say OK, cancel. You don't hit cancel. You hit the red X or just reboot the whole computer. Don't do anything. This is one right here that, believe it or not, we've had too many people that have fallen for this one, where they've gone to a wrong website, they've loaded something on, this message pops up, and they call it, and they call that message. That is such a problem, because now the person on the other end of the line is pretending they're in IT support. They're walking them through how to infect their own computer. They're walking through all the steps. So it's really important that you don't do that. The other thing I'll talk about, and I may already have this later on in the slide, but on this deck, but I want to talk about it now because it's really relevant. Mobile devices. Mobile devices. What we've also been seeing lately is that the bad guys have been texting users, and then the users are now clicking on it. They're getting a message very similar to the one you see on the screen right now. And so the user is now calling that. The person on the other end is like, oh, all right, well, let me check your phone, like, load the software. Okay, no, the phone looks fine. All right, you know what? Let's check your computer and make sure the computer's fine too. And the users are going through and loading these applications on the computer. So they're actually, the bad guys are actually using the mobile phones to social engineer the people to get to the computers now. Something to keep your users aware of. We've actually had a couple instances where that has literally happened, where people have gotten a text message and gone too far with it. All right, phishing. So phishing right now is probably the main way that the bad guys are getting in. There's a lot of other ways that they're getting in, certainly, but phishing is the main way that is preventable and education-based. So you can see all these stats, which are basically saying phishing is bad, right? So we'll summarize all the slide decks. I'm not going to read them all to you. Here's some things to look for. So the basic fundamental parts of a phishing attack is, one, they're going to look like they come from a trusted authority. That's number one. Number two, they're going to have some kind of sense of urgency. You got to help bail out this person. You got to do this. You got to change this account. You got to update this account. Oh my God, you've been breached. You need to change this password. Some kind of urgency that happens in there is going to tell them that they need to do something. And then the last thing is they're going to request some kind of sensitive information. They're going to bring you to a bogus login page. They're going to ask you for some kind of credentials going through. That's what you have to worry about. There's a lot to go over in the phishing emails. There's a lot to look at. So what we did, we actually have an entire training video. It's only about 15 minutes just on phishing, just on spotting a phishing email. We actually took a whole section. We did a 10-minute webinar turned into like 15, 20 minutes on just spotting a phishing email. So the way you're going to get it is you're going to go to our website, you're going to go to resources, 10-minute training, and then when you get there, you're going to see a whole bunch of 10-minute training videos. One of them is going to be how to spot a phishing email. When you're done with this webinar, watch that video. That's really important. Have all your staff, if you can't get them to watch this training video, at the very least have them watch that one. It is so critical to have that. We literally bring up live phishing emails that have come in, real life examples, what to look for, what to go into detail. We found that it was too much detail to put in just this webinar, so we actually had a separate small webinar just for that. Probably our most attended webinar ever on just that one subject. It's right up there. It's free. Just take it, use it, spread it to everybody you know. All right, here's the components. Here's some subset of that webinar, if you will. This is actually a white paper that Jen was great enough to produce. It's up on our website. There's a link to it right underneath that training webinar. So if you look at that link right there, it says download right underneath that webinar. That's what that link is for. It actually brings you this page that you can then share with your team to go over. And this is a great training utilization that you can get on your staff. You can give it to them as part of their onboarding process as well when they join the company. Next, let's go into some examples. Again, we're going to go into a subset of that phishing video here. Here's some things that you're going to look for. You're going to look for the from address up there. You're going to look at the links that don't match. So you can see the when you hover over this one, it points you to a non-Amazon account. You're going to say that up top it says it's Amazon without an A, Canada, CA. So they're intentionally, so this one, it says Amazon on the red, but when you hover over it, you can see that it totally says something different on it. And then you can say that it's to generic instead of to you. Plus, we all know Amazon doesn't send these emails. It should be a red flag right off the bat. Same thing with Citibank or any of the bank accounts. They're going to send you messages that are going to try and make them look as realistic as possible. Here's one as well. This one probably is, I would say, one of the ones that get fallen for the most. So the next sections, basically, when I say that the ones that look the most basic are typically the ones that are most effective. It's amazing. The ones that have the most graphics and everything like that are probably the least effective. The ones that are just basic, saying, hey, you don't have a message, you have a message here, recover this message, click it. Those are the ones to most people just look like legitimate messages. So they're going to click it. All the same things. You're going to hover over that link. You're going to look at it saying, okay, do I really want to click on this? Do I not want to click on it? Look at the from address on this. This is totally a bogus from address. Same thing with voicemail. This one always cracks me up because we've had people fall for this that don't even have voicemail to email. There's no facility in the company that will allow that to happen, and yet they still click on it. That's how amazing these basic solutions are. All right, let's talk about social engineering for a bit. Social engineering is going to be, it could be the phishing, but it could just be somebody calling your office. So what I want you to do is talk to your staff about who they're talking to on the phone, who's emailing them questions. If somebody says, hey, listen, I have this document, can you resend it to me? Have them question it. Have them give a second thought. Why is this person asking me to resend this document? Did they actually get it the first time? How did they get it? Maybe they got it through means that weren't, maybe they stole it from somebody else and they're trying to get it. Social engineering is basically somebody calling in or somebody on the other line using a small bit of information to get access. What does that look like? So let's say somebody was in the process of doing a deal, right? They're doing a deal, and that deal somehow made it to the news, made it to the press, whatever it is. Somebody's building and making an investment in a bridge, buying a building, a new corner store, new bakery down the corner. All that stuff is public information. So the bad guys are going to take that information, right? What they're going to do is they're going to take it. So let's say you're a building manager and somebody called you up and they said, hey, I'm XYZ company and I rent from you and I'm in your building. It's like, okay, yeah, you are. It's like, I know our rent is due. I can't remember how much it's due for. Well, the building manager is gonna say, oh, all right, well, that's no problem. Who am I talking to? You're talking to XYZ. I'm a new controller here. I just want to get this paid to you because I want to make sure you don't wait. Building manager's like, all right, fine. Let me just look up what you paid last month. They look it up. Oh, you paid us $21,250 last month. Controller on the line is like, great, thank you so much. I appreciate that information. Now, what does the controller know? Controller knows how much the rent is for, right? So now the controller is going to go to the tenant. Controller is going to call up the tenant and say, hey, yeah, this is XYZ. I'm your building manager. We have a new form for you to pay us. Who's in charge of paying us? Oh, well, Joan is the one paying us. Great. Can I talk to Joan? Yeah, sure. We'll put Joan on the phone. Put Joan. Joan, this is John. We're new building manager. We have a new way for you to pay us. We want you to now wire the information down to XYZ company, right? So this is where we want you to send it. So once you send that to us, we want you to, incredibly annoying. So once you send this to us, we want you to wire this amount. So this is your normal amount, right? Oh yeah, you pay us this much per month. Oh great, okay, I want you to wire it to this amount. Okay, we'll wire it. 1 month goes by, 2 months go by, 3 months go by, 4 months go by. Finally, the building manager's like, oh, you guys are like 4 months behind in your rent. No, we've been wiring it to you all along. Well, it was just a simple conversation. It didn't take much for that person to go through it. That, unfortunately, is actually a real life scenario that actually happened, what I described to you. I know it sounds really basic, but it actually works. It actually happened, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Another famous person that was subjected to this type of fraud was, unfortunately, one of the Shark Tank people. She was duped out of $400,000, and all because of social engineering. That's all it took. Somebody saw in the news that she was doing some deal, and they just started social engineering the people in her office. They ended up wiring it to the wrong place. So I know it sounds really far-fetched, but that actually is what happens, and we actually hear it on a regular basis that it's happening. Educate your staff on social engineering and how they can be taken care of. Also, work with your bank. Make sure you have security steps in place for wire transfers. These are like some basic steps that you could have. Your bank is going to have their own solutions on what they can and can't do. Make sure that you have something in place. All right, next. About Us page. So basically, this is going to be a constant battle all the time between marketing and security, and it's never going to go away. Jen, God bless her soul, on this line now, her and I have this discussion all the time. What do we put on our page? What do we not put on our page? What can people know about us? What do they not know about us? And there's no great answer that I can tell you, because you want to talk about all your clients and everything that they have in place and all the good things they do. But then that's the same thing the bad guys can see. If I know everybody who's on your staff and I know all your clients and I know all your vendors, my gosh, that's like a recipe for me to get what you want. But at the same time, the whole point of the website is for marketing and advertising and getting new clients. So it's a tough mixture and a tough, see if you can find a good balance in your organization, but just know that that information on your website can be used. So have your staff alert to the fact that, hey, listen, does this call sound suspicious? Does this email look suspicious? Are they asking me a question that they shouldn't ask? And that's going to lead to issues like this, which is spear phishing. When they start to get that information about who's in your company, they're going to start sending you emails that are specific, that look like they're from somebody in your company that are trying to get something bad. So basically, there's a really common ones, trying to get iTunes gift cards, trying to get different scenarios. Actually, let's go through. This one is legitimate emails. Names of the guilty have been changed to protect them. But this is a legitimate email chain that we actually, one of our clients was kind enough to share with us. Basically, the bad guys trying to get them to buy a whole bunch of iTunes gift cards, and they're trying to give legitimate reasons on why they should do it. And at some point, our client said, wait, this sounds suspicious. This doesn't sound right. And they stopped, which is the right thing to do. And they called us and said, wait a minute. Unfortunately, too many people go too far and actually do give them the information. They actually do give them that, they start scratching off the gift cards information and giving it to them. You got to have your staff educated, because if they don't know enough to look at it, they're not going to stop. We had one of our clients that did this seminar, talked about the iTunes gift card, got a call from them 3 weeks later. The controller called me up and said, you're not going to guess this. I was in front of my admin's desk. They actually went through this. They actually went out and bought the gift cards. She actually went through 3 of the gift cards because she stopped, like, wait a minute. He actually talked about this in the security webinar. I shouldn't go any further. All right. Your HR department, they're also a key target. So what will happen is they're going to get emails from bogus users inside your organization asking them to change their payroll. They're going to say, hey, listen, we have a new payroll. I have a new bank account. Can you send my payroll here? And they're going to go through, again, this is a real life email. This isn't one we made up. This is a real life email from one of our clients. And they actually went as far as to send her a voided check for their bank account and say, yeah, here's actually the voided check. I want you to wire my paychecks in here. There's an incident, not one of our clients, but there's an incident of this happening to the CEO of a major organization. They didn't even know they weren't paid for 6 months. All that money just went to a fake bank account, but then got transferred into Bitcoin and gone. Other thing you have to worry about, keep an eye out for, is fake invoices to your clients. So again, if you get breached or somebody comes in, they're going to start looking at your emails. So let's say somebody gets into your email account because you don't have two-factor authentication set up. We're going to talk about that in a second. But let's say you didn't have it. So basically, they're going to go in, they're going to watch all the emails going through, and they're going to see all the emails that you have for your clients. They're going to say, oh, look at this invoice that's due. Great. I'm going to actually send them a dummy invoice, and I'm going to have them pay me instead. Again, unfortunately, it actually happens. Phishing training is one way to keep that from keep the bad guys from getting in. But we're going to talk about the main thing right here. Two-factor authentication. My gosh, if you do not have two-factor authentication on your email, in particular on your SSL devices, but let's talk about email in particular. My God, please, 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 please get two-factor authentication set up. It is painless. It is free. I can't tell you enough reasons that you should do it. It is so simple. It's so simple. We actually put, in that same resource page, we put a training video on two-factor authentication. It was a 10-minute webinar we had. You know how long it took to actually do it? It took 3 minutes. I had to talk for an additional 7 minutes just to make it a 10-minute video. It literally takes minutes to get this set up. We went through a training video that you can give to your users on how to set it up. We also, Jen, also created this document that you can download to actually give to your users. She actually put the QR code right on there so you can get an actual app to actually do the two-factor authentication on there. You don't need to use Microsoft's two-factor authentication. You can use Google. You can use almost anything out there. Just please use it. Please do it. Please set it up. I cannot stress this enough. Two-factor authentication is more important than your password right now. It's the main thing that's going to keep the bad guys out of your email account. Please, please, please get it set up if you don't have it already set up. Most important thing that you can do, set it up everywhere you can, any way you can, on every application, anything that you have. It's not foolproof. Don't get me wrong. It's not foolproof, but man, it is so much better than what you have. It is 90 times better than anything else that we have available to us right now. All right. Weekly security tips. So basically, we send out weekly security tips. If you're not on that list, let us know. I think we're revamping them right now. So Jen is reworking them, so it's a great time to let us know if you want to get back on that list. Basic blocking and tackling. Disable old user accounts. We meet with our clients on a regular basis. We give them a report of all the user accounts that haven't logged in 30 days. We ask them to go through those user accounts, and if they're no longer needed, delete them, get rid of them. Always disable a user account as soon as they're not needed, but then after a period of time when you no longer need the account at all, delete it altogether. But always disable it as soon as they're not using. There's always another way to get somebody that data without leaving that account enabled. Change the passwords regularly. Should be every 6 months at least. Should be complex. All those things. Two-factor authentication. I'll beg you again if you could. Complexity of the passwords is important. Password length is more important than complexity. What does that mean? That means that if you have a password of XYZ123 and it's 8 characters, that's a good password, all right? That's not bad. However, if you have a password that says, my dog has bad breath all day long, that is a so much better password because there's so many more characters and it's so much more difficult for them to crack. And of course, it's like the ultimate pinnacle is if you take that and take the I and put it as an exclamation point or a number 1 and put an @ in there and do like that. That's going to be your best password possible. And they're also still easy to remember, but they're very, very difficult to crack. Cybersecurity insurance. If you don't have it, get it. Really important for you to have right now. I am not the biggest proponent of security. I've actually done this exact webinar for an insurance company. And I literally said in the webinar, I said, listen, I'm not the biggest fan of insurance, but you really need to get cybersecurity policy. I actually forgot I was doing it for insurance brokers and had to call the people afterwards. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry I said that about insurance. They're like, no, totally, I get it. You really need to get that. The other thing that we've seen, and we've seen this with a couple of clients so far, so it'd be going to be interesting to see if this keeps progressing. One of our clients, they were told by their insurance broker, the insurance broker would not renew their insurance policy unless they confirmed that they had two-factor authentication set up for their email. That's the first time I've heard that. And that happened within the last quarter. That's going to be new. You might run into that. So again, now it's your actual insurance company telling you. Hybrid office and bring your own device. I'm going to talk about this really quickly. I want to kind of keep us on track for timing. Keep in mind, if you have users bringing their own devices in the office, guess what? Whatever's on their computer just became on your network. I am not a big fan of bringing the users' computers home. This is different. A year ago when we were talking mid-COVID, I get it. It was a mad scramble. Anybody, everything, anything, you get it. That made sense. We're not in that situation anymore. If you have users using their home devices, you need to basically pony up and get office equipment. You want to have complete control of what's on your network. You don't want to rely on your users to do their own security. You don't know what they have for antivirus protection. You don't know what they have for malware protection. You don't know what security updates they have. You don't know any of that. And you're just putting it on your network. That's a huge liability. A year ago was a different story. We had to just get the users working. I get it. You did what you had to do. Those days are gone. You need to actually do the right thing for your company and limit the exposure that's down. Make sure that when they're at home, that their screensavers are locked at all things. If they're working at home, keep in mind the work environment. They're no longer working with the rest of your staff. They're working with the rest of their family. kids, spouses, grandparents, whatever, they're all in there. That also talks when they're talking on the phone. Keep in mind, you may want to have a policy that says, listen, if you're talking about confidential data, either to our clients or anything like that, you got to make sure there's no family members nearby. But also make sure you lock your computer, because I don't want your kid coming by and doing something on your computer that's going to kill our network. Make sure you have the same policy enforcers. Again, this is why we want to see office equipment in there so that you can start having the same security when people work from home that you can have when they work in the office. Storing files locally, my gosh, please try them not to have them do that. You don't have any way to back up those files. You don't have any way to retrieve them. You don't have any way to secure that they're going through. You don't have any good way to secure. They should not have any files on a local computer. They should all be on some kind of corporate network, a corporate infrastructure, something that you can control, you can manage, you can do version control, and more importantly, most importantly, you can do backups on. So you want to have some kind of corporate infrastructure in place on what they're doing. File sharing software, basically, file sharing software is good as long as it's done the right way. It has to be backed up, it has to be secured, it has to be company approved. All right. Wi-Fi encryption, we'll talk about that again. What I'm worried about on the Wi-Fi side is I'm worried about what else is on that Wi-Fi network. Because if your users are tying in via the Wi-Fi to your company, I'm concerned what else is on that Wi-Fi getting into their computer. All right, another free report for top 10 ways hackers. Feel free to reach out. Let us know if you want a copy of that report. Happy to get it to you. We're going to talk about working from home only from the standpoint of voice. Obviously, most of you know that we sell a hosted VoIP system. Some of you are on hosted VoIP. If you're not on hosted VoIP, you really should be with a hybrid workforce because it's incredible. They can work from anywhere. They can do anything. But there's also security involved in that as well. So now you have to worry. Now you keep in mind that basically you want to make sure those phones are locked, that they're in a safe place, that they're only used for corporate information, that basically somebody's not calling out on the office line to somewhere else. But probably the most important thing is 911. So basically, when you have a phone that is at somebody's house and somebody dials 911 on that phone, you want to make sure that that address matches where that phone is. You want to make sure that each extension has its own 911 of where it's located. The old days, it was easy. You just did one for the corporate office, you were done. Now, if that phone is in somebody's house, they're going to dial 911. They dial 911. You got to make darn sure that the ambulance doesn't show up at your office instead of their house. You can also just have a policy, just tell them to disable the phone, but obviously things can happen. So quick little tip is basically if you dial 933 from a phone, it'll actually tell you which 911 location is located on that. So you obviously don't want to dial 911, but if you dial 933, it'll actually read back to you the address information that's going to show up on it. So that's really cool. You're not bothering the emergency people, but you're still finding out what address is set up. Update family members, put the phone away when it's not in use. All right, we also have a free white paper on the hybrid workforce, but let's face it, most of you guys already have this done. So you probably don't need this anymore. I can take that out of the slide deck. Blogs, keep an eye on our blogs. We constantly update these with new threat information, new technology, new updates. Incident response report. So this is one that's available by the federal government. That's actually a pretty good one. If you want a copy of it, you can either Google that, or if you want a copy of it, you can reach out to us and we'll send you a copy. If you have ransomware, we have steps that we go through to make sure that. So basically, here's some basic steps to go through. Make sure that it usually happens between a lack of user education, your backups weren't monitored, anything like that. Certain steps that you go through. If you ever have a problem, obviously give us a call. We're going to help you as much as we can. Wrap up. Oh, look at this. I am doing great on time. All right, so we talked about the new challenges, security problems and solutions. We talked about securing your network, and we talked about what to do going forward. Basically, having a secure network, having a secure workforce is probably going to be the most important thing that you have right now. Somebody does something stupid, it takes down the company, it's going to cost you time, money, revenue, and reputation. You're going to have to explain to people why you don't have something that they need. That could be just as damaging, if not more, than everything else that's out there. Every time you hire somebody, have them go through the cybersecurity training. Make sure they watch it, make sure they know it, and also the phishing training. Make sure they watch both of these. You need to let them know that this is the basic setup that I need you to have. This is what I want you to be responsible. This is what you should know. All right. Recap. This is us, Braver Technology. We've been around for a while. If you have any questions, obviously you know how to reach out to us. And then with that, this must have been a really concise and amazing, or the questions aren't working. So I'll stay on the line for a few more minutes in case anybody has any questions on it. Other than that, thank you very much. What I would love, even if you put it in the Q&A, just give us some feedback. Good, bad, sometimes the bad, good is great. I'll take that. But anything that we can do to improve this, can you talk too fast, cover too many subjects, whatever it is, I'd love to see it in the Q&A, post it up in there so that we know if we learn that we can make these webinars even better and even more useful for your team. Jen, do you have the answer to our poll?
The answer is brown M&Ms. They make up 13% of the colors.
There you go. So now you know more than just cybersecurity. You now know M&M technology. I bet you weren't expecting that when you signed up. All right. Jen, anything else that we didn't cover?
No, I think we're good.
Awesome. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. We're going to keep this open for a little bit in case anybody has any questions, pop them up. If not, I hope you have an amazing day. Jen will have this recording up on our website. If you go to the resources tab, go to cybersecurity training, you're going to see the sign up for the next one, and you're going to see the link to the recording for this one. Thank you very much.